Ed, I got a listener and a viewer. I get these emails practically every day. When's Ed coming on? When's Ed coming on? Ed, you're here. And to the listener that sends that, Ed is here and he's going to talk all about the wonderful business that is May Mobility. And I'm proud of you.
Hello to the listener out there.
See, you got a personal hello from Ed. And if you showed me your real name, you can even get a personal hello. And May is a business. You and I have talked about years about this, and I'm really proud of you because every time since the first conversation we had, you're like, we're a business, we're a business, we're a business. And then I see a headline come across my desk. You're expanding to Asia. And here's the key with an investment and partnership from Grab. Did Anthony Tan call you up and say, Ed, let's go into business? How did it come together?
I may have had whiskey with Anthony at one point, but it is a great team. We're really excited about working with them. I mean, the reality here is that this is part of our playbook. That building a ride hail service is a really big job. We do autonomy well, but we want to partner with the people who know how to build the rest of the components. And Grab has a great ride hail service. They also do mapping. They're also doing other kinds of technology development and data collection. And they provide a platform for us to expand into another geographic region with new complexity and new weather challenges and really test our technology capability. It's super exciting.
Do you view the partnership with Grab? I'm going to use the kids analogy, the May Mobility Lego block, plugging into the Grab Lego block.
I think that's about right. I think if you think about all the components that have to come together to deploy a ride hail robotaxi kind of service, there's the autonomy, like the guys who do autonomy, like us. But you need a vehicle platform, and that's where we've chosen to partner. We partner with Toyota. Toyota is the biggest OEM in the world. Great partner. Who's going to generate the demand? Well, we partner with Uber, Lyft, and Grab. So, the biggest companies in that space. In terms of operations, we're going to partner with people to do operations. We're partnering with insurance companies. And ultimately, we think that by bringing the best of all of these different components together, we'll have the best ride hail experience, the one that's going to outcompete the Waymos of the world.
From a cost perspective, over time, does that help keep your costs lower and more manageable than some of your larger competitors?
I think the biggest challenge for AV companies like us right now is capital burn. Very few companies can afford to spend the kind of money that Waymo is. We don't have Alphabet's balance sheet. And so the strategy is very deliberately like, hey, where can we bring partners in, make our product better, but also reduce the cash burn of the AV company itself? So we're super focused. We build the autonomy stack, we work with partners, and we get to profitability faster than other AV companies.
When you're looking at profitability metrics, and if you're looking at maps of the world, are you looking at certain markets where perhaps there's higher density, less competition, where you get to profitability first, and rather going to a large sprawling metropolis such as Los Angeles?
Not necessarily. So the main things that we're looking for are how robust is the ride hailing market. So what you want is a large number of trip requests, because if you have a large number of trip requests, you're going to be able to drive your asset utilization higher, because empty vehicles don't make anybody any money. So you want the markets that are big. And you also want markets where the cost of labor is generally relatively high, because that's what allows you to charge more for every hour that you're actually operating. But then that's in tension with where you're going to be able to go to driver out as quickly as possible. Because if you're still safety driver in, then it's a pilot. Nobody's going to make money on that. So the challenge there is that where the vehicles can go driver out today may not be the nastiest of the nastiest, densest downtown core environments. So you want to find that happy balance between, hey, where are we going to make money, driver out, and be able to keep the vehicles as busy as possible.
So in Southeast Asia, obviously Manila is not going to be your first market, even though it could be a viable market. To me, what you described is Singapore.
I mean, there are multiple great markets there. And the reality is that markets that are just on the cusp of being exciting today are going to be amazing markets in the next couple of years. And so we think that there's a huge advantage to building those relationships, getting our vehicles on the ground so that we can grow and be the heir apparent to those markets as they come into focus.
In that part of the world, you not only have Grab, you have the Singaporean Sovereign Wealth Fund that's recently taken positions in WeRide and Pony AI. So there's a lot of capital there to accelerate growth. As you focus on Southeast Asia, the weather is different. It's humid, it's rainy. How do you adapt the May mobility system for those different weather environments that you're based in Michigan that are a lot different than Michigan?
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that we've taken head on. We've operated in over 20 cities to date, all across the United States and Japan. Very, snowy places like Grand Rapids, Minnesota. I don't know if you've been there. It's a rural city, 14,000 people. Snow is 6 feet high in winter. It's amazing. It's so much fun. To much hotter, like Arizona's, to Miami, and places where it rains. Like there's torrential rain. I think there's two key challenges to those kinds of weather conditions. One is that there's a basic perception challenge. Do your sensors operate well in the rain? And that's a challenge for everybody, but we're all making very good progress on that. I think actually where it gets more interesting is when you go to a completely new environment, whether it's Japan or Southeast Asia, you get not just, the physics is the same, the traffic laws are basically the same, but the driving culture changes dramatically. And this is where I think where the technology foundation that you bring has a huge impact on what your cost to enter that new market is. And what I mean by that is, if you're building a monolithic end-to-end network, the sort of thing where it's like, I'm just going to throw pixels at one end and train the gas brake steer out the other end. You train it, it works great in Los Angeles. What happens when you go to Southeast Asia, where the driving culture is different? People behave differently. The correct answer in the same situation is different than what it is in the US. If your only approach for that is to, well, I guess we need to go collect millions of miles more data to retrain the system to browbeat it into behaving like a Southeast Asian driver, you're going to be paying through the nose every time you go to a new market. And so this is one of the things we've really focused on. How do you build those world models that allow the vehicle to understand, yes, physics, yes, traffic laws, but also the culture of how people drive and what the right way to drive is in that environment?
Culture is the key. So me being, I'm not an engineer, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, so I will say that. Where are you getting the data sets from around cultures? Is it the culture of the minister of culture? Where are you getting those data sets? Because in Japan, as you know, one, you're driving on the left-hand side of the road, and two, here we will walk everywhere. No, there it's very polite, and you wait. So where do you get that cultural data?
Yeah, to reframe this a little bit, the challenge if you're building AV stacks in a lot of the traditional ways is that you're essentially building memorization systems. Like, oh, I in my training data, I saw this, and the correct answer was this. And then I saw this situation, the right answer was this. And if you're driving around and you're in an environment that looks like something in your training data, the car is going to perform well, maybe even brilliantly. But the problem is that a lot of these systems generalize very poorly because they fundamentally don't understand the physics, the traffic laws, and the culture. They are just memorizing what they've seen before. So this is the fundamental thing that we do differently, as we've talked about many times before. We're building models that are predictive in nature. I think there's actually a nice analogy to large language models. If you've got a large language model and you've got a bunch of text, the large language model will tell you what text comes next. Well, that's what we're building. At the core of our system is a world model, which you tell the model, hey, here's what happened over the last few seconds. What happens next? And you can sample and make predictions about what's going to happen next. It's not memorization, it's making a prediction. And just like a large language model, you can apply that model multiple times to generate more and more text, or in our case, predictions that go farther into the future. So what this means in terms of culture, when we first went to Tokyo, turns out pedestrians in Tokyo are pretty different than Detroit pedestrians. Detroit, I would say that the rules of right-of-way have a lot more to do with who's got the bigger car than who's got the green light. In Tokyo, it's a little different. Basically, there's no jaywalking, very, very little jaywalking, but also pedestrians are wildly more trusting of cars. When the light turns green, they just start walking out. And so what we noticed when we started operating in Tokyo was that the predictions we were making for other agents weren't as good. They worked great in the US market, but were not working as well to predict a Tokyo Japanese pedestrian. So that's a place where then we know, hey, here's the part of our system that needs additional data. And we can go and we can collect the data. It doesn't take a huge amount of data to just retrain pedestrian behaviors. So it's not millions of miles. It was a few months of data that we then retrained our world model for Tokyo, and we're off and running. That's the game book. That's the playbook that we take to Southeast Asia, because there's going to be more cultural surprises. In fact, I just learned the other day about in Singapore, there's the pocket. If you're making an unprotected right turn, there's an actual little portion of the road that's painted on the road where you're supposed to go and tuck in there before you make the unprotected right turn. I've never seen that before. There's a good example of a new behavior that you need to learn. And if you're approaching this as a monolithic end-to-end system, your answer is, well, I guess we need to go collect a few more million miles of data. It's going to slow you down on every single launch.
It's not only going to slow you down, your burn rate is going to accelerate. So let's use the pocket, for example. If you look at Singapore, you have, if you want to call it Embassy Row, and you have, dense apartment buildings. You have downtown. You have Marina Bay. You have everything in between. Do you go to different, I'll use the word quadrants of the city, different parts of the city to test the system? So you're not just testing in one part of the city, you're making city state, I'll clarify it's a city state. You're understanding that can work in all neighborhoods, not just one neighborhood?
Well, so the strategy is always you want to avoid overfitting too much to any one area. But also our strategy is also that we don't necessarily need to boil the ocean, to mix my metaphors here. I think one of the challenges, if you are, here's the basic pitfall of like the Waymo go at your own strategy. If you are building your own ride hail network and your vehicles are the only thing providing service within that network, then every time a rider picks up their phone and requests a ride and you can't service them, you're at high risk of losing that customer forever, right? They're going to uninstall the app, or at least not open the app the next time they need transit because you let them down. So what that gives rise to an incentive or a need, a necessity for companies that are going it on their own to launch on day one with an expansive, huge ODD that covers as much of the city as possible, because if they don't, they're going to hemorrhage their customers. We don't have that problem, right? So the problem, we have this huge network that's backed by human drivers, whether it's Uber, Lyft, or Grab. And that means that we can take on the areas where that are most profitable, that make the most sense for the autonomous vehicles today, generate revenue, generate margin on those. It doesn't have to be the whole city. Of course, we don't want to overfit and find ourselves confined to one neighborhood, but we can launch the driver out service in one zone, make money, then add 10 more vehicles and expand it by another square kilometer, add 50 more vehicles, expand it by another 10 kilometers. This way, we're constantly matching the demand to our supply and never spending more money, having a bunch of assets sitting around underutilized, and always providing a really good experience, consistent experience to the rider.
So that's fascinating. Jeremy Bird from Lyft has said on the podcast before, he calls it the hybrid approach, or the hybrid network, where you have human drivers augmenting autonomous vehicles. And the technical term, the ODD, I'll just call it a service area. Do you set the service area, and then do you approve the expansion of the service area, or is that in conjunction with your partners? How is that initial service area determined?
It's very much partnership kind of approach. So we know where we can operate, they know where there's demand. And what you want to find is the happy balance between those, where we're going to be on a path to driver out very quickly and where the demand is the highest. So this really is like we share data, we work together, we identify neighborhoods, we identify regions, quadrants of the city, and then we launch. And then we're going to collect the data and then expand, and then expand, and then expand. This is, I think, the best way to roll out Robotaxi, because it's just going to be wildly more capital efficient.
What happens when, these are all hypothetical numbers for the audience here, so these are just hypothetical. Let's say you launch in a 10 square mile radius on day one. Day two, now you're at 30, 40 miles. Day three, you're at 100 square miles. How do you determine from the routing perspective, and then how do you not make the mistakes that your competitors, unfortunately, are making around, they don't have enough vehicles? We've seen screenshots on Reddit, screenshots an X 38-minute wait time. Give you an example. I was in Menlo Park a few weeks ago, and I went to order the Tesla Robotaxi. Two dangerous things. One, I had to walk across Sand Hill Road. That's not good. They drive like Mario Kart race car drivers, and it was a 38-minute wait. It didn't work. I ordered an Uber. It was there in 2 minutes.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. Like if you go your own, you're building your own ride hail network, and all you've got are the Tesla vehicles in that network, or just the Waymo vehicles, or just the Zoox networks. Every time they're busy or they don't go exactly where you want, you get a bad rider experience. And so companies like Waymo have enough resources that they are putting lots of vehicles and lots of resources into these to try to make the rider experience as good as they can. That's a very expensive game. So our strategy is, hey, let's take the rides that we can, and if there's more demand than we have supply for, then that's a great problem to have. But for that rider who's out on the curb trying to get out of off of Sand Hill Road, we can send a traditional car instead and make sure that the wait time's always good.
And then let's just say, hypothetically, let's say over a 6-week period, 8-week period, 12-week period, your partner calls you up, say, Ed, we're seeing really high demand for this. Is that what triggers to add more vehicles to the fleet, or what is that trigger mechanism to add more May mobility vehicles to the fleet?
Yeah, there's basically a magic amount of utilization, where the vehicle, the utilization level times the hourly revenue is greater than the cost of the operating vehicle, like where the vehicle tips into positive margin. And we want to be putting as many vehicles into market as possible such that we are positive margin on all of them. Once the utilization starts dropping low because we've saturated a particular zone, then it's probably time for us to look at expanding to the next city. Now, meanwhile, our cost of our vehicles is going down and down and down, which means that markets that previously were not profitable, or where the asset utilization had dropped from 90% to 80% to 70%, and maybe 70% was not profitable on day one, but by day two, maybe 70% actually is profitable. That's one of the things that, because the cost of the vehicle is coming down, not literally day two. These are biblical days, right? But this is the strategy. And I think also the other important thing is that we've been very focused on the total cost of providing the service. Yes, that's the cost of the vehicle, it's the cost of the sensors, but it's also the total cost of ownership. How much downtime do the vehicles spend going around in circles calibrating their sensors? And if you can drive the cost of that down, and how much did it cost you to build the maps and to localize to the culture in a particular area? If you can drive that cost down, then you can be profitable in segments of the market where a lot of the incumbents cannot be. Waymo has very high cost of operations. They can only go to the highest demand, highest labor cost. They are stuck in the a relatively small number of markets, very desirable markets, don't get me wrong, but there's a huge amount of the world that they can't make money in because their cost of operations is too high. That's where we can also be successful by having a smarter vehicle with a lower total cost of ownership.
So how do you get the lower cost of the vehicle down? Is that because of your strategic relationship, and also tell to the audience they are an investor in you, Toyota?
That's definitely a big part of it. There's the vehicle itself, and working with one of the largest OEMs in the world. We have Toyota employees that work on site with us every day. We're talking about the integration of the engineering, how we remove redundant components, how we can reduce the cost, how we can ultimately scale these things to build tens of thousands of vehicles per year. So that's a huge, huge opportunity for us. We're really excited to be working with Toyota in that regard. But there's also at least two other major components. One is like, how much does it cost? How much time does your car spend down? How much maintenance do they need? How fickle are these vehicles? Are they just irritable little toddlers that have to be coddled every day? Or are these vehicles that you can just flip on at the beginning of the day and just send out and turn them around? For example, we have hybrid vehicles exactly for this reason. We can turn around a hybrid vehicle in 5 minutes by filling it with dino juice, versus an electric vehicle where you're going to have massive downtime every time the vehicle needs to top up. So there's a lot of things you can do there to just keep the vehicle on the road available to deliver rides a greater fraction of the time. And then the other side is you're going to a new city. How much does it cost you to launch in a new city? That's the mapping, but also all of that retraining that you might need to do because, oh my God, Singapore's got torrential rains, or Japan's got pedestrians that actually don't jaywalk. So all of those costs are things that have to be paid back in the long run over the cost of the operation.
And then you kind of alluded to it, but you didn't hit it. I'm going to put a nail on the head here. When you're building a depot, the to get the electricity there is expensive. The permitting process could take years in some cases. The build out is millions. You eliminate that. So let's go way, way back. We're not going to go back to the gems in the May mobility history. But we're going to go way back. Why did you choose hybrids in non-electric? Because and I know the market gotta go all electric. And you're like, yeah, wait a second, there's a better alternative here. Why did you make that hybrid decision?
Yeah, and before we started working with Uber, Lyft, and Grab, our bread and butter was in the B2G space. So selling into municipalities, still where a lot of our heart is, that we want to work with public transit. But there are a lot of public servants that are like, I'm going to turn our municipal vehicle fleet green. And we would have meetings with them, and they say, okay, I see you've got hybrid, but we really want electric because we want the press release of so and so Indiana is now a fully green public transit agency. And you say, okay, well, that's nice. Have you thought about the cost of the vehicles? Have you thought about the cost of the infrastructure? Have you thought about the cost of the reduced asset utilization because the vehicles have to sit on the chargers? Have you thought about the risk that the battery technology is changing very rapidly, and you might make a huge investment into today's batteries, which are obsolete in 2 years? And like, let us know, like, if electric vehicles really what you need to have, we do have an electric vehicle platform, but they're like, actually, hybrid's sounding pretty good. And the other thing is we're fortunate that working with Toyota, we've been able to identify, I think, probably the best ride hail platform in the industry. Like Toyota Sienna, this is a sexy ride hail vehicle. Like, you're not crammed in the back, one row with like the I-Pace. Beautiful car, not a lot of space. It's like a Robin Williams with the itty bitty. But this is a great vehicle. It's one that we can make wheelchair accessible for customers who want to invest in that, which we obviously love that as well. And it's got lots of space, and it can be turned around quickly because it's a hybrid and it's a Toyota, so it's just ridiculously reliable. It's the best ride-hail vehicle in the industry.
And it's comfortable. You're very kind. You hosted me last winter in Michigan. We went for a ride. It was very comfortable. But Toyota it's the Sienna's a great vehicle. It's comfortable and plenty of room in there. You're right, because when you're in the back of an I-Pace, oh boy, this is tight. But Toyota has lots of makes and models, extremely well engineered. And they also have a little brand, or a big brand, called Lexus. And you remember everybody was running on the Lexus hybrid SUVs back in the day. I also believe that you ran on those. The 450, it might have been the 450H.
Yeah.
Will you eventually, because of your strategic relationship, look at other vehicle platforms depending on the market with Toyota?
Yeah, we've been really, really fortunate. Toyota has been very open with us about their product roadmap. A lot of that I can't share here. But I'll give you an example that they also have, an all-electric platform, the ePallet, which is, a vehicle built for ride hail and for transforming mobility. And we are one of the very few people who have upfitted and made autonomous ePallets. They are in service, or I don't know if they're currently in service, but they have been in service in Japan. And that's a vehicle platform that I think shows that the breadth of what we're able to operate. And one of the interesting things, this comes back to the scalability issue. Did we have to go back and retrain our system because the cameras are now in different positions, because the ePallet is a 14-passenger vehicle, much, much bigger than a Sienna? The answer is no. So, fundamentally, the scalability of the architecture reduced the cost for us to add a vehicle platform to our fleet and be able to go into other markets that would not have made sense even in a Sienna, where you just needed a bigger vehicle.
And do you take the learnings from the ePallet and put it into the system as well?
Oh, for sure. Yes. So all of these vehicles, all the data, every vehicle that we have is constantly looking for unusual situations, things that might be beneficial. So they automatically extract a portion of the log, and that log snippet gets sent back to HQ. And we can learn from Siennas, we can learn from ePallets. All of that gets merged together into a single code base.
Toyota's been very public around their hydrogen ambitions. Do we ever potentially see a May Mobility hydrogen vehicle in certain markets, depending on, I'm going to go back to it, the infrastructure, if the fueling infrastructure is there?
I'm not an expert in hybrid powertrains. I think if customers want it and there's a supply chain and it makes economic sense, like, I don't have a horse in the race. Like, intrinsically, hydrogen, dyno juice, or electric, those are different engineering choices with different trade-offs. And today, like, hybrid just totally kicks butt in terms of all of the metrics of making money. Hydrogen does not. If that changes, great.
But the beauty about your model from a business standpoint is that I'll use the term your platform agnostic, and that's giving you the ability to scale.
It's a huge part, yes. And I think most AV companies in principle can take their technology from one vehicle platform and put it on another one. But the question is like, okay, you can, but how much retraining do you need to do? And the more sort of monolithic your end to end, if you're sort of in that end to end family, the more sensitive your vehicle can be to relatively modest changes of camera position. And that can make it very expensive to make even minor changes to the vehicle.
So that's the camera aspect of it, but we can't have this conversation without talking about the NVIDIA release today around the GPU is still great. We're light years ahead of Google, and because Google's TPU, you've seen with the Gemini 3 model release. Do you see the onboard compute getting smaller and changing over time? And is there a possibility, not just necessarily May Mobility, but possibility that you could begin to see autonomy move away from NVIDIA to kind of have a diversification strategy?
Yeah, so we actually are on NVIDIA hardware today. So a combination of Intel and NVIDIA. So we know the ecosystem pretty well. I think the reality is that the supply chain for automotive grade ECUs is pretty weak. You've got sort of the NVIDIA Thor, which is not really available in quantity. Like we can't get that many of them. And then Qualcomm's got a couple devices, but they don't have the performance capability of the NVIDIA Thors. So there's really not a lot of options today for a super scalable system. I think it's one place where Tesla building their own compute may have helped them, because they can just say, well, screw it, we'll build our own. Something you can only do when you've got that the capital to do it. But it's absolutely the case that today the supply chain for ECUs, high performance ECUs, is a real bottleneck. At the same time, this comes back to the network architecture. Like, how much compute do you really need? And if you are building a system where your R&D vehicles have 6 NVIDIA cards in the back trunk, what you got there is an R&D project, not a product. And so you have to be targeting a system that is reasonable in terms of its compute requirements. Every flop that you use is more silicon that you have to buy. It's more heat that you have to remove and more power you have to supply in the first place, and probably more packaging that takes up more space. So there's just this ongoing expense. Every flop is precious. And this is why thinking about the architecture from a big picture perspective of how do we keep the power requirements to a reasonable level so that this vehicle can have a lower total cost of ownership, because again, that drives where you're going to be profitable, and that's going to drive which markets you can enter. I think that's one place where we've done really well.
If you look at your Sienna minivans today, the one, for example, that you were very kind to put me in, the driver out one, the compute was in the passenger seat. When do we start to see the May Mobility packaging for your compute start to go and shrink? Because to me, I said, okay, I got to put on my business hat here. You open up that seat, more potential revenue for you.
Yeah. So there's a couple aspects. Today, our compute solution is quite bulky because of the supply chain, that we have to kind of mix and match components to get the parts that we need in the vehicle, and all that adds volume and space. And you're right that today in our vehicles, the front right seat, so the passenger front seat, is not occupiable because that's where the computer lives. Now, on the one hand, actually, I think there's a couple places you could conceivably put the computer. That turns out to be a pretty convenient place because it's inside the weather sealed, temperature controlled volume of the vehicle, right? Rather than putting the compute on the roof or something like that, where now you create a whole new packaging problem that's going to add cost. But I think the end state where we're looking for is that it does go and it goes underneath the dash, and we free up that seat for sure.
Do you view the packaging of the componentry being done in partnership with Toyota, since they know the electrical infrastructure of that vehicle inside and out?
For sure, yeah. In the end goal here is that we want our customers to be able to call up Toyota and say, hey, I need another 500 Robotaxis built to the May spec. Ship them to Los Angeles. That's where we want to be. Like where we never even touch the car. Everything Toyota, that we provide a set of specifications, some drawings. Toyota works their magic on supply chain and quality and manufactures these things at a scale that nobody else can beat. That's where we're headed.
So we're going to go there, but I want to just level set for the audience here today. when you deploy in Atlanta or Southeast Asia or Japan or Arizona, are those vehicles owned on May's balance sheet? Are they owned on partners' balance sheets? How does that work today?
So the long term, the future vision, to be clear, is that we're not in the business of operating or carrying vehicles on our balance sheet. There are companies that are really good at this, where there's the enterprises of the world, the Transdevs, the Moves. We see them as the natural partners to do that. But today, we want to be out generating revenue, growing these business relationships. And so where there are gaps in that ecosystem, we'll step in and fill the gap. So that includes, we do operate the vehicles. So today with our deployments with Uber, Lyft, Grab, we will be the operator, at least on day one, eventually migrating to someone else. At the same time, though, we really don't want to own the vehicles on our balance sheet. So we work a lot with financing companies like Toyota Financial Services to lease these vehicles over time.
That's really smart. So now let's go to your Los Angeles vision where I call you up, hey, Ed, I need 500 May Toyota vehicles to spec. Toyota sends them. Do you envision Toyota having multiple factories around the world that are capable of this? Perhaps one in Ohio because of tariffs, perhaps one in Japan because that market. How do you envision that network working?
So I think it's not just going to be Sienna or just one platform. We're going to need a mix of platforms from a variety of form factors. Some smaller times. Sometimes a sedan is a good form factor. Sometimes you might need a pickup truck if you're picking someone up at Home Depot. And then there's the homologation issue that the vehicles that are built for the U.S. market can't just go to Southeast Asia without being modified. So this is one of the things that we're really excited about. Some of the work that we are starting with Toyota is to figure out how does this work? How do we get vehicles for every single market that we want to go into?
If you look at markets, you're publicly in the United States, you're publicly in Southeast Asia, you're publicly in Japan. I gave a talk earlier today around, I called it Battleground Europe, where there is this emerging battle for market share in Europe. Are you going to Europe next?
So the short answer is that it's going to be the same playbook for us. Would we go to Europe on our own and become a Waymo-style vertically integrated company? Absolutely not. Right? That would throw all of the advantages of our strategy out the window. If we identify a great partner in Europe that is like an analog to the partners that we have in the U.S. and Japan and Southeast Asia, very, very well could end up in Europe.
You mentioned playbook. What is the playbook? Is it a series of specs? Is it a series of things that you're looking for partners to do? What does that look like when you're going in there? And then on the backside, is that playbook audible where they have to meet the May mobility standards? Because at the end of the day, yes, we have all the legal consequences, but you're a brand and you've built a lot of trust. And you and I can go down a list over beers or whiskey about this, about the trust that you built with governments, the trust that you build with public, the trust that you've built with individuals around there. You're a brand and people trust you. So what goes into that playbook and how do you maintain that trust?
Yeah, it actually, this is probably the biggest risk factor for our approach. That, if we are working with partners to deliver important rider-facing parts of our system, if they blow it, then the rider's going to have a bad experience, even if we did everything right on our side. So that's why we don't just work with anyone. So all the partners that we're working with are ones that we have confidence are going to do a great job on their side to help create a really great rider experience. And I totally agree with you that this rider, the brand recognition is a huge thing. I don't know if you noticed, by the way, that wherever we've launched, we never white label. So all of our vehicles are always May branded because we do believe that at the end of the day, people are going to recognize May as like, every time I get on a May vehicle, it's a pretty good day. The vehicle's bigger, I've got more space, the ride's good, I can focus on work. I think people are going to learn to associate May with a good quality ride. And we want to take that goodwill and grow that into a brand that every rider seeks out.
When you grow the brand, then you're going to get the inbounds. Your partners, Grab, Lyft, and Uber, are going to get inbounds. Well, I want a May vehicle. I want a May vehicle. And at some point, Uber, in my opinion, is going to do an autonomous vehicle tier. So when you get to that tier, and Uber is public with a variety of partners, you're going to be competing with some of those partners in the city. How do you differentiate your brand from theirs? Because the Forrest Gump line, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. The Uber app is life a box of cars. You never know which one you're going to get. So how do you differentiate that?
Yeah. So I think there's going to be two epochs of competition in the ride hail space. So today, what was it, 3 million odd vehicles that do ride hail in the United States? Some ridiculous number. And how many autonomous vehicles are there? 1,000 across everybody? Maybe a little more these days. It keeps creeping up. But the point being, it's a moat in the size of the market. So what is an autonomous vehicle competing with? Are autonomous vehicle companies competing with each other? No, we're competing against vehicles with human drivers. And this is where you have that box of chocolates problem. You call up a traditional ride-hail vehicle, you don't know what's going to show up. You don't know what the driver is going to smell like, or how friendly they're going to be, or how clean the vehicle is going to be. It's a lottery. And so I think autonomous vehicles, especially professionally managed, which all autonomous vehicles are going to be fleet managed, professionally maintained vehicles, they're going to be the desirable version of ride hail very, very quickly. Everybody's going to quickly figure out this is great, but there's not going to be enough of them for a long time. And the pricing of ride hail is going to be dominated by the cost of a human driver, because that's what forms the bulk of the supply of transit. So now imagine several years go by, we're cranking out vehicles, tens of thousands at a time per year. Waymo's doing tens of thousands per year. Like, we're all like fully going, we're filling the market. Even with tens of thousands of vehicles, even 100,000 vehicles a year, even it's going to take years to replace all of those traditional box of chocolate ride hail experiences. Now, when that actually happens, now we enter a different epoch of pricing, because now when most ride hail vehicles are autonomous vehicles, then now we're going to be competing against Waymo. We're both going to have margin to play with. We could both try to undercut each other, and it could turn into a race to the bottom, unless people just like your brand better. And that's part of the game that we're setting ourselves up for now. We want people to love the May brand and trust us now, so that we're better positioned in that future.
In that future, because you're right, and at the end of the day, it's going to come down to brand value. How do you ensure that Susie or John or Bob or Sarah can get paired with the May vehicle and not necessarily with a competitor vehicle, because they say, no, I want the May vehicle because I like the experience? How do you ensure that? Because that's my whole thing with this aggregation model, as when we go to the future, is that here we are again, instead of humans doing it, it's the autonomy doing it.
Yeah, it's a good question. Short, I don't know. So I think the model that most people are thinking about today is that you pull out your ride hail app. Now, if it's the Waymo One app, you know what you're getting. It's going to be a Waymo. If you pull out an Uber app, and then maybe there are multiple AV companies on there, are you going to request an autonomous ride? And then, well, maybe it's May Mobility, or maybe it's Motional, or maybe it's something else. Or is it going to pop up? And if your brand really is that valuable, when you're picking Uber or Uber Black or Uber May, does that become a top level item as opposed to Uber Autonomous? For me, that sounds like we won, right? It sounds like when our brand is valuable enough that everyone wants to pick that, like, forget the rest, I just want a May, then we've won.
Yeah, and then the tagline is, may I have a May? See? That becomes your tag, because
write that one down.
there we go. See, I'm doing pretty good today. But that's where this market's going. I think that's where the Uber and the Lyfts, and they run into these aggregation issues because of the brands. And I'm starting to pick up on a trend now, which is very interesting. It's going to parallel autonomy. We are probably 10 years away, if that, from your tipping point that you describe. Because if you go back 10 years, Uber's going to kill taxi jobs, blah, 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 blah. Now you're starting to get the same thing where autonomy is going to kill rideshare. It's interesting how we're starting to go through this big shift again, which to me signals that this is about to take off, because those early, if you want to call it the crickles, the crackles, are there today.
I think that's right. And at the end of the day, it's not like we are just ending jobs. We're providing a better product. The reality is that people don't want a driver in their car, especially one that's erratic. And even a good driver that's, talking a mile a minute while you're trying to, fire off some emails in the back seat. The problem here is not whether it's autonomous versus manned. The problem is that the autonomous product is a better product. So this is a huge opportunity. In terms of labor, yeah, there are going to be job impacts. People drive today for a living, but the other reality is that if we zoom out a little bit, what is the one of the biggest challenges that everyday people have? It's getting to work on time. It's getting to the grocery store. It's getting their older parents to the bridge game. And these are things that there's not enough transportation capability out there to do that. That's what we're providing. And ultimately, this is going to help everybody, including people who are working class people trying to hold down a job, trying to take care of their family, because now they're going to be able to reach out and grab transportation that's going to get them to their job with a low wait time, low nonsense, and keep them and their bosses happy.
And the other thing for an elderly individual, if you're a driver, it's not talked about enough. I know I rant and rave about it all the time. I can't tell you how many older individuals over 77, 78 that will not get an Uber and Lyft. Yes, I'll read your data, but this is personal. Will not get an Uber because they're afraid of the driver. I'm frail, I'm weak, but I'll get into an AV. There's no driver to attack me. And then think about the freedom, the mobility freedom that I unlock for somebody. You want to go to the bridge game, or you want to go for your G&T. And then everybody says, okay, yeah, well, that's what you want to call it the first level of greatness. The second level of greatness, mental. Think about what that does mentally for them. And I believe, and I know scientific data to back this up, it can potentially increase their longevity.
I find that completely non-controversial. So, I have older parents myself. They're being stuck at home is not mentally stimulating. If you can just reach out and get transportation when you need it and have confidence, you take away the barriers. Like, oh, is it going to be hard? Is the app going to be complicated? Is the driver going to pull over where I want them to? Are they going to listen to me? Are they going to, whatever the case is, you take away those barriers, people are going to go out more. They're going to be more physically active. Like my mom will go to the grocery store and walk around the aisles. That's good for her.
Talk to people.
For God's sake, yeah. Like, God forbid that we actually talk to people and interact with each other. But I totally agree. Transportation is oftentimes, or a lack of transportation is the barrier that prevents people from getting out of the house and being physically active and being engaged socially. And that's got to have, I don't have any medical data, that's got to have positive benefits.
It does. But to achieve that, you've solved autonomy. Point blank, May solved it. Your competitors have solved it. To get those elderly individuals is the great unlock voice. And I asked about voice because they're comfortable with Alexa. Is that the great unlock where they can have a voice interaction with the vehicle? Okay, vehicle, when am I arriving? Okay, vehicle, are we there yet? Where are we going? Is voice the great unlock because it gets that, I'll call it the creature comfort for those elderly passengers?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that's really like a customer study question. I think if that is the case, then we should provide a voice interface. I personally can't stand voice interfaces. I'd rather touch a screen, Star Trek my way to wherever I'm going, than talk to a system. But that's partially the point. Like, are you providing the interfaces that the riders like? For example, in our B2G deployments, of course, we had an app. But we had a lot of riders, especially older riders, who did not have a smartphone or just didn't like to use it. So we provided a traditional call-up service. Hey, I'm at the Bridge Club. Can you take me to the grocery store? Sure thing. We'll meet you outside in 5 minutes. And they don't need a phone. So providing those barrier-lowering accommodations is super important.
I remember Jody Kelman. Mission Autonomy. Jody Kelman worked on this program years ago at Lyft, way back at Lyft. And I remember, and Lyft published a blog post on this, when they did the phone thing, there was a spike in elderly individuals using Lyft. And so we know that works because you and I, yeah, okay, so you're an engineer, I'm a wannabe engineer, and you hit the buttons, okay, away we go, no problem, we're comfortable with it. But the elderly individuals, they still think they can break something if they don't use the app the right way. So that has to be overcome. But yet, you call the number, and they memorize phone numbers. Me, I can't do that, but they can memorize phone numbers. 1-800-MAY. Okay, I'll be there. But then, let's go back to before he passed away, Tony, the founder of Zappos, would tell these stories. People call up to order pizzas and have these conversations. If you can have call center, which will create jobs, by the way, will create jobs, and talk to these elderly individuals till the vehicle gets there, hallelujah, it's a win. They're comfortable, and now guess what? They're only going to use your service, and the May brand is complete.
Let's do that. No, you're exactly right. We want to be the best, easiest to use transportation service in the space. And that also means expanding the service, to places where you might not think of robotaxis. Like if your total cost of ownership of your vehicle is lower, then we can provide service farther out into the suburbs. Today we're going to be focused on super high asset utilization, but if our cost of operating a vehicle is lower, we can make money even if we have to deadhead our way back, to the depot. And so that's a huge, huge leverage for us to increase our impact, because that's a lot of what May has always been about, from our work with public transit to now, is how do we help make transportation better, because we think that better transportation is going to make better cities.
Just think about that. The positive value unlock that going to suburbia or ex-suburbia has. At 2026 is a few weeks away. It's a hop, skip, and a jump. So we got suburbia on the mind. What else is on the mind for 2026 as it relates to May? What can we look for? The audience can look for, and just a little tidbit. It might be public, but man, what can you tell us to look for?
I think what you can expect is to see more driver out and more engagement with our partners, Uber, Lyft, and Grab.
I'll summarize it this way. I think there's big things coming with May Mobility in 2026. And for the record, Ed has not told me that. I just assume that because I've always been a big fan of what Ed and the team at May are building. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is May Mobility. Ed, as always, sir, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy.
Thank you.